Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. I am excited to be with you today, and I'm talking about something that is a hugely important topic. And it's one that I'm approaching sensitively because I don't want this to sound like a me kind of pod episode. But I think that most of the people that listen to my pod fall into the category of needing some advice and steer and encouragement around this subject. This is all about advocating for yourself. It's about home and it's about work and any other third space that you want to think of. And this is about this idea of there being times when your needs, the things that you are feeling, the contribution that you are making is not being heard, is not being recognised, and isn't being considered in the mix. And I think the first thing I want to say before anything else is that I think it's really important to not make an assumption that that means other people don't care. I think that by nature, we're often consumed with what we're doing or what matters to us, that we don't always consider what's going on for anybody else. So I think the first thing I want to say as we get into this conversation is this is not about everyone else being unkind or evil and not considering us, but it's about us learning that people aren't mind readers and they don't always know what we need. And our hope that people might realise that, we need to shift gears perhaps into thinking, I might need to tell them. And I think if you are the sort of person that by nature is thinking about what other people need, you are going to be expecting that people are going to do that in return. But not everybody does. If you are a mom of toddlers or teenagers, they are not yet fully able to recognise the needs of the people around them. We are inherently, apparently so much of the data around teenagers is that they are inherently aware of how things affect them. So if you're in that life stage and you're expecting them to go, oh, I think this must be hard for you, they may do that occasionally, but by nature, that's not yet fully developed. And the way they're going to develop that worldview is perhaps by you showing them. So if we don't advocate for what we need, we aren't helping to teach and train the people around us of what those cues, what that looks like in their lives. So I think there's a reason why we need to do it that's bigger than just for ourselves, actually. How do people learn? How do we grow in this area if nobody's told us? How do we realise that somebody's not been advocated for unless we show up and tell them? So this is about life at home, but it's also about life at work. Maybe people aren't noticing your contribution. Maybe people have put quite a lot of pressure on you and your workload feels or is actually in reality higher than some other people's. Maybe you're going to have to advocate and say, actually, I can't take that on because you might not realise, but this and this is going on. And it needs to be verbalised and it needs to be articulated. So that's what today's episode is all about. And I think this is important because a lack of advocating for ourselves and then all of the sort of dynamics of modern life means that we end up getting totally exhausted by being everything to everyone. And you choose your environment. That could be work, that could be home, that could be family, that could be extended family. You might feel like you're being a caregiver to actual children. You might be caregiving to your parents, which is kind of where I'm at as well at the moment. You might be a professional with a job. You might have a partner that you are considering. You might be a sibling. You are a friend. You are in all those different environments, being everything to everyone. And, you know, I quite relate to this at the moment. It's felt like a bit of a season of my hats feel multiple and consuming. And we can then feel a little bit resentful or exhausted of this because we aren't recognising what we need. We're not being, as Penny Windsor would say, brilliant book by the way, we're not being tender to ourselves and we're not advocating for what we might need. And so this isn't about putting yourself first or not doing any of those things. It's about ensuring you are on that list. I think that for me that's a really helpful metaphor. Like all those roles in my life are really important to me and they are more important to me in many ways than some of the things I might want. But in the seasons where I haven't even featured on the list, I'm exhausted, I'm depleted, I am going to get resentful because I'm not Mother Teresa, I'm a normal human being. And so that's going to feed into the mix. If I learn to think that my name's on that list too, and I do what I can in the current season to do that for myself, that is not a selfish thing to do. And we've got to separate the difference between self-centered and self-aware. What do I need? Some of you listening might be like, I don't even know how to begin to even start to ask for what I need. Maybe you are not even able to work out what those needs are or whether those needs are valid or fair. And maybe some of you feel like asking for help is a weakness. I can't remember if I've said this already, but I saw this image the other day of a person who was trying to move house, and they'd got a sofa that they were trying to move to their new house. And it said, are you able to ask for help? And this picture was like of a person trying to move sofa, and they were using like a wheelie chair rather than asking another person to help them. And I can think of some people in my life and in my wider life where they just do not ask for help. And they don't know how to ask for help. And there is an underlying reason for asking for help, which actually is a suggestion that I don't deserve help. I'm not good enough to need help, and I should be able to do this on my own. You pick and you choose what that message is for you. But we've got to understand that, again, we're not teaching people how to be part of community, how to do life together, if we're suggesting we never need help. There was a book that came out years ago. I actually haven't read it. I've just heard a kind of summary of it. I think it's called The Curse of the Strong. And it's actually about this idea of people who are never asking for help and never asking for what they need. And eventually what happens is they can have quite serious consequences from that. And that is the curse of being the one who's normally the strong one. And so keeping your needs on the list in some way, shape or form, however much caregiving you're giving or all those things, is so important. And I know there'll be people listening to this who've got some quite extreme caregiving situations. You might be living with elderly parents or giving a lot of care to them. You might have a partner who's got significant needs or a child with special needs. And those are vastly consuming life circumstances. But you still need to think about how you stay on the list, how you remain on the list and you recognise what you need in order to do what's expected of you. And I mean, this is a bit of a side point, but my car needs to go in for a service and it needs a cam belt doing. And every time I'm driving it, I'm thinking, what if the cam belt just spontaneously falls apart just on this particular journey? And I keep imagining that means the car's going to set fire or whatever. But if I don't give the car a service, it will go on and on and on. But eventually, something like the cam belt going will happen. And that has quite dire circumstances. It is quite a big deal, I think, if your cam belt goes and you don't repair it. But if you treat yourself like that, you go and you go and you go, you don't have a service, you don't, do the things that need to be done, a cam belt moment's going to happen for you. Maybe you've already had one. Maybe you have been so quiet about this for so long that actually even beginning to talk about this feels really alien. You're listening to me talk about this and the need to advocate, and you're like, well, I've not done this for years. I don't even know where to start. You need to listen and have a listen to what we talk about in here. And having boundaries, which we're going to talk about a little bit today, is not about becoming a really unreachable, inflexible person. I think, again, we with human beings, we are so extreme about things. We either live with no boundary and we're like, yeah, I'm here to serve, I'm here to give. Or we go the other way and become so boundaried that we're inflexible. We're not willing to put ourselves out and our life has to always remain in balance. That's not real life. We're not always going to be in balance. And sometimes we have a boundary that we have to cross. I remember when my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, they had a very premature baby. And it meant for a while that before we then went into lockdown, and it was a very difficult period, but in the run-up to the baby being born, they had a lot of emergency hospital visits, which meant that they needed people to come and stay overnight nearby where they lived to just kind of be with their children that they already had. And sometimes I remember my brother-in-law saying, some people just don't answer their phones on Saturdays because they've got this boundary that I won't be interrupted on a Saturday because it's my time away from interruptions. And that boundary is a wonderful thing to have in place, which, by the way, I don't have. But there are times when we have to break that boundary and realize this is a situation where someone needs me. And I think sometimes these kind of boundaries leave us being so rigid and not willing to play that role of being a village to one another, to use that language. But then you become the other kind of person that has no boundary and you're always the first port of call. And I think most of the people who'll be listening to me today are that second group of always the first port of call. And you perhaps need to think about a little bit of boundary. So that's who this is for. And we're going to talk a little bit more about self-advocacy, okay? So the idea of self-advocacy might sound really selfish. It might sound, this is another one of those me first podcasts, but it's not. It's actually an everybody first kind of conversation. But it might be that you feel guilty about even beginning to talk about what you might need. You might feel a bit like, who am I to ask for more? I have a nice life and it's my job to care for my children. It's my job to turn up at work. It's my job to look after my parents. It is. Those things are your responsibilities. But it doesn't mean that it's not okay for you to say, I need a bit of time out today. I need a couple of hours on my own. There's a book from when I was, when my children were little. It's been around a long time. I think it's called 5 Minutes Peace. And I think is it elephants in it? It's really famous. I'm sure it's elephants. It's this family of elephants. And the mom just wants to have 5 minutes peace in the bath. Wherever she goes, the children are following her. The children are, wanting her to do something. And these lovely cutesy baby elephants are following her all the way through the book. And in the end, she goes and puts herself in the bath. And before she knows it, the children are all in there. And one of them, I think, is playing a musical instrument to her. And another one's got in the bath. And it's a classic book about this idea of where's my moment? And that book was written because this is a real issue, 5 minutes peace, How do I get this? How do I not feel guilty or feel that I'm unworthy to have 5 minutes peace to myself, to recharge, or to be able to get the help I need to handle a difficult situation? Some people don't feel like they're not worthy, they feel guilty, or they feel afraid of the conflict. Like, actually, I just don't want to say, so I'd rather not say anything. I'm just not going to rock the boat. Don't upset anybody. It might be misconstrued, so we'll just keep going. And we don't say or speak out loud something, so we don't ever give people the option to understand. As I was saying before, I think this is so much about other people as it is about ourselves. If I don't say, I need help, or this is too much, or can you support me in this, whether that's at work or whether that's at home, I am not giving people the opportunity to do that. They may be looking on and thinking, she doesn't want any of my help. She's fine. And in fact, my help will be just not particularly well received. Sometimes people don't even know what they need anymore because you're so disconnected from it, you don't even know what it is that you need, what helps you recharge, what helps you feel more yourself. So using some of the methodology that I like to come back to in my work and in my book, it's important for you to start by recognising where you're at. Do you feel exhausted? Do you feel like you've lost your voice? Do you feel resentful? Is work an issue here where you need to readdress the balance? Is it home? Is it both? I think then you've got to stop and think about who you are. What part of your own personality is playing into this problem? I think sometimes we think it's external factors, and I think sometimes it's us too. We are part of the reason why we're in this place. We feel it's our responsibility. And I think you've got to then stop and think about your values and how they've played into this. Or are there some underlying truths that you are living by that aren't very helpful anymore? And how are you going to make some change? Apparently, 43% of women feel they advocate the right amount for themselves. With anxiety, fear of retribution, and fear of being considered aggressive being cited as the top reasons for not self-advocating, that's probably more to do with work. I'm surprised that 40% of women do feel they advocate for themselves because I talk to so many women who wouldn't do that at all. Interestingly, that women are by nature just not so good at saying this is what, as well as what I need, this is what I contribute. And that plays out in the fact that women fall short of men in getting their first promotion, according to studies. And this carries on. So it's like this, I'm not going to say what I need, but I'm also not going to represent myself and say what I bring either. The work I do with a lot of companies is to give people the language to talk about what it is they contribute and what it is that they need. So every individual in that leadership team or in that wider team has the language to be able to say, this is what I contribute to this team, this is what I bring to the table, and this is what I'm going to need in order to do that well. If we can do both those things, we're advocating for ourselves in terms of this is what I do well, but this helps me thrive. And that kind of language of bring and need is helpful for work, is helpful for home, helpful for friendships, helpful for anything that we're in. And I think using language where we can talk about ourselves, I feel, I need, I bring, is not me, me, me. It's about owning a perspective rather than, like I said before, expecting other people to be mind readers. I spend so much time working on relationship dynamics with people, and there is such a big issue that we expect people to behave like us, and we expect them to read our minds, and we expect them to know what we need because we think they need it too. But where you might need dialogue and discussion, the other person might need time and space. And we're completely missing each other out of a good heart and a good direction. But because nobody's really talking about it or advocating for themselves in any of these environments, we're completely missing each other all the time. If I think I'm being a really great leader because I'm setting up a project with my team and I say, right, this is the project, this is the headlines, off you go. I don't mind how you do it. We'll check in a month's time. And I think, well, aren't I a great boss? I'm so releasing. I'm so flexible. I'm so empowering. But the person I'm leading likes detail, likes to ask questions, likes to have more steer and clarity. I'm not giving them what they need, even though I think I am. But if that person never explains that to me and I continue to do what I'm doing, we're just going to miss each other. That person hasn't advocated for themselves and I haven't been able to respond to that. So I think knowing who you are, knowing your strengths and talents, I was bound to say this, really helps us understand what we contribute, what we enjoy contributing, but what we need in order to thrive. And if I can leave you with anything today, it would be learn how to talk about yourself in that way. At home, in your relationships, in your workplaces, with your colleagues, with your leaders, with the people that report to you. In all those environments, the I bring, I need is such helpful language to have. And to say this is what I bring is not arrogant. If I say I bring clarity, that's one thing that I bring to the table. It doesn't mean I bring everything else because I absolutely don't. If you say you bring fresh ideas and fresh perspectives or flexibility, that's great. You probably also don't bring routine and discipline. Somebody else can bring that. So to say there is something that you do bring does not mean that you are contributing everything. And I think we need to have language for it because some things are very external and obvious. Like I'm a person who talks a lot. I'm quite articulate. So what I bring perhaps is quite easy to tangibly pick up. But there's so many aspects that I don't bring that if those people aren't advocated for and learning to advocate for themselves, it's not going to be represented or recognised or appreciated or celebrated even. So if you are in the position where you could create an environment for your team to go through that process, I'd really encourage you to do that. If we're talking about your life at home, think about what you bring to your home life, to your relationships as a daughter or as a son or as a partner or as a parent. What is it you really bring to the table? And what is it that you need in response from the people that you love? I also think we need people that we trust. People who can actually hold a mirror up and say, you are on the edge, or you need to take a step back, or what are you doing for yourself? I've got a couple of really good friends who in this season and my husband have been checking in around, are you getting some balance? Like Laura will look at my diary and she'll say, you need to take a little bit of a break here. There's a lot going on. So as well as learning to advocate for ourselves, there are people we need in our life who help us do that. And it might just be a small, if life is really tough, if you are in a caregiving season, or if you are in a major sprint at work, if you've got a massive deadline, you aren't going to be able to do loads of things for yourself. Like that is unrealistic. But you could advocate for, I am going to go for a walk at lunchtime. I am going to eat my lunch away from the table. I am going to go for a run with the dog tonight. There is always room for little bits and pieces, even in the biggest, busiest, toughest seasons. Take the 5-minute thing rather than the no-minute thing. But what you might need to actually articulate is to say, I need to do this in order to keep going. And I was thinking about the teenage element, again, talking to friends who are parents of teenagers. I'm a parent of teenagers. And, I've got some lovely teenagers in my life and I think the world of them. But they will not, by nature, fully see things from my perspective. Partly, I'm their rock. I'm their mom. I'm there to do that job. I have to remind them sometimes that I need things too. And I may need to play the role of telling them that so that when they grow up and have their own relationships, they've been reminded that strong people and even people who are there for them need to recharge too. And if I don't communicate that, where are they going to learn that? It's not fair to expect them to do that by osmosis. So I think we have a responsibility to the people around us to be reminded of this stuff so that we're helping them to grow and to learn as well. And you might feel like I shouldn't have to advocate myself to my partner, to my boss. They should know. And do you know what? Maybe they should know. But if they haven't had the experiences in life that have taught them that stuff, you may have to explain some of it to them. I even remember talking to my husband sometimes about like the mental load factor, that he's really happy to help and does plenty of things. But sometimes I don't ask him to because the whole having to like explain what's in my head and get it out there means I'd rather have just done it myself. But I have to explain that dimension to him. Otherwise, it looks like I am just doing everything myself and not asking for help. And explaining that sometimes asking for help and having to explain what needs to be done is really exhausting. We can't expect people to always know and understand all these things. They're not in our head. They're not in our experiences. And neither are we in theirs. So it's really important to do that. So as I come into land, I just want to give you a little bit of a thing to come back to and to refer to, okay? The first thing to do is to recognise what's going on. I always say that, recognise the situation that you are in. Recognise whether this is a moment to you're going to need to pick a battle or speak up for yourself or ask for help or say no, put a boundary in place. You've got too much work on at work. You can't take on that project. You actually want to get some credit for something that you've done. You want to be involved in something. Recognise this is a moment or not. Decide if this is a moment to negotiate, to speak up for yourself or not. The second thing is to prepare. The worst times to try and advocate for yourself are when you are responding out of emotion or in the moment and you just then blurt something out and you haven't really thought about getting yourself in check first. Prepare for the moment, especially at work. Prepare for how you're going to explain what it is you're looking for or why you're going to say no or why you need help or why you're not going to be able to take that project on, and also maybe solution that can go with it. And particularly also at home, prepare in terms of so that we don't just launch into a emotionally charged thing where we're probably not going to represent ourselves very well. A couple of days ago, I was really, really snappy, actually. And mid-snappiness, I was kind of being a bit low-key angry. And mid-emotion and mid-saying that, I actually stopped and said, do you know what? This is nothing to do with this. I'm feeling like this because of X, Y, Z. And it was a rare moment of like in the moment realizing that I was being something that was nothing to do with the moment. So taking a step back, dealing with the emotion that we're feeling is a good idea before we then engage in these things. And then we initiate it. And bringing solutions and helping people see things from different dimensions is so good for us all to grow. And then we need to kind of navigate our way through. What if we did this? What if we tried that? So really what I'm saying here is that we need to step up and we need to think about ways to advocate for ourselves. We can't just... This episode was never going to be a whinge fest about why everyone else isn't thinking about us. Yes, people need to grow, and yes, people need to develop, and they need to help us have the space to thrive or to contribute. But we've got to take some responsibility for that. We need to speak up for ourselves. We need to model what it is we're looking for. We can't expect people to mind read and know on our behalf. I think we need to, at work, we need to be saying what our hopes are, what our goals are. Sometimes we need to initiate and say, I'd like to be involved in that. Sometimes we need to say, I'm learning this area. Can you give me some feedback? We need to talk about what we need. We need to look for opportunities to get stuck in. And maybe make a bit of a document of the things that you've been achieving, so you've got something to come back to. And if you're in that situation where this is probably an episode in itself, when you need to go to your boss and advocate for yourself around a specific issue, like a promotion or a pay rise or a job redefinition, the more you've collected of evidence of the ways you've been contributing, the more confidence you're going to go into that conversation with. And I think finally, I'd say, if we're learning to advocate for ourselves, who else can we be advocating for? If we're learning to speak up and say, this is what I contribute and this is what I need, how do we do that for some people around us? How do we, where there might be somebody who isn't able to do that yet, or for whatever reason feels in the feeling of minority, how can we share what we're learning and make room for other people as well? It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about speaking clearly and kindly and inclusively so other people learn how to do that too. So I hope this podcast has given you a little bit of a nudge. Maybe it's made you feel a bit uncomfortable. Maybe you know there's some conversations you need to have or some thoughts you need to drop in. But things aren't going to shift by some sort of magical revelation that the people around us in our lives start to realise what we need. We are going to have to do some of that explaining ourselves. If this has touched a nerve, what's one small thing you can do this week that begins to advocate for you?